everyone, this is Hill Street Soul, and you're tuned in to The Core with the Millennial Coach, discussing topics on real life. Check it out. Everywhere you go, don't forget the ghetto. Listen to The Core, don't forget the ghetto. With the Millennial Coach, don't forget the ghetto. 'Cause it's the best show.
Let's get into today's discussion and welcome to The Core with your favourite podcaster, the Millennial Coach. And it's season 2. I am an accredited coach who travels the country to change lives. So let's get into our subject today, and thanks for tuning in. But don't forget to subscribe to get me every week in your inbox. But before we get stuck into today's episode, and if you ever fancy listening to me live, you can log on to www.itch.fm every Thursday at 8 p.m. UK time on any device of your choice for a live broadcast with great people, great tunes and great conversation. So let's go, people, and get into today's episode with me, the Millennial Coach. Welcome back to The Core. If you are visiting for the first time, I hope you enjoy the show, and if you have returned for more pain and torture of my voice, I hope you also enjoy the show. I am an accredited executive coach, and you're locked into itch.fm. If you like or love the shows, you can catch them on Mixcloud. You can just type in DA the Millennial Coach on Mixcloud and I'll pop up. And if you want to hear it without the music, you can hear my podcast on Apple, Deezer, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Google, and the rest, where you can listen to The Core and me direct without any music. But before we get into today's show on getting out of the funk and procrastination, I'm not sure what you guys have been watching and news and topics and stuff you've been enjoying, but hot topic obviously has been Ben and Jen, but I couldn't care less. Personally, I am not interested in who's literally getting her panties in a twist. I don't care. But I've been introduced to this show called Blue Therapy. Now, I have argumentative debates with the person that sent it to me, and it's been interesting watching couples, particularly black couples, with a therapist go through their issues. I don't know if it's staged, so if anyone thinks it's staged, I'd like to hear from you on Instagram, Twitter, or even catch me on Facebook. It's an interesting concept, but I think there's 2 couples, right? So there is Deborah and Jamal, and then there is Paul and Chioma. Now, Chioma is meant to be some influencer of some description. I don't even understand what that means half the time. Those of you that have listened to the show for quite a while, you know that I couldn't care less about influencers or Instagram models, whatever you want to call yourself. But Chioma is a lovely girl, I have to say. I think Paul is very narcissistic from a coaching perspective. So if you are someone who has had the opportunity to watch it, it's very interesting to watch somebody slowly build a reputation in whatever it is that they're doing, but they actually don't realize that their arrogance is actually making them more narcissistic. But again, I'm not the one in a relationship with him, and I don't have to, like, he wants fresh food every day. I don't have to do all of that for him. So I do wish Chioma the best. I hope she finds somebody else, because she is beautiful, articulate, just a nice girl. And I think when you see nice women, it's not every chick that will put up with a lot of the nonsense. But I think when you believe in a guy and you believe in his potential, women, you will put up and bypass certain things. But sometimes you do it to your own detriment. So I think you've got to think about how much pain are you prepared to go through, and how much is he prepared to give you in or counteracting the pain that he's causing you. And I'm not talking about physical pain or domestic abuse, none of that. I'm talking about just mental stress. If you're in a relationship with someone, it should be easy. Relationships shouldn't be pain. And yes, relationships will always have challenges. But let's go on to Deborah and Jamal. Now, Jamal needs to talk with his mouth straight. That's the first thing I have to say. He talks like out the side of his mouth, which is uber annoying. And half the time it sounds like he's had his jaw locked because I can't always understand what he's saying. But Deborah, my darling Deborah, 24. Someone, so I was told, yeah, but she's young. I'm like, yeah, but when I was 24, I was hustling. By 26, I was in the Middle East. So I'm sorry. We do measure people by our own standards, but I do have, I would say, decent standards, not foolish standards where I'm expecting a man to buy me a Gucci bag. And then I didn't even understand the fact that she felt it's necessary to be treated like a princess. I think when a man is thinking of settling down with you, buying a house, etc., that is going to be more valuable than any Gucci bag. But the key thing in any relationship, if someone's buying you a gift and you can't afford to buy that for yourself, don't make any demands. Okay? You've got to put in what you can also get out. But if you're putting in 18% and then he's putting in 82%, where's your value? And that's vice versa. It's not just the woman, but if a man is not bringing it to the table or coming correct, I just don't think it's worth investing in him, or her. So I think Deborah and Paul should date. I don't think Chioma and Jamal are a good couple. So I think Chioma should go off and find a man that is going to adore her, But there are things that I would definitely say on Blue Therapy from an African child and upbringing perspective, I would never have said. But if this is what people want to do with the knowledge that this is on TV, yes, you got over 1 million viewers. That's fantastic. But I just think there needs to be some level of decorum and keeping your character intact, even if you were a hoe. I'm not suggesting anyone was a hoe on the show, but even if you were a hoe back in the day, nobody needs to know about it. You need to keep, as they say, a lady never tells her secrets. So the fact that, people had the diarrhea of the mouth on the show, I just thought, I don't know. Okay, so that's the first show that for me, that's a show that if you have the opportunity to get to watch, and it's on YouTube. I think there's 5 episodes. I think the finale is next week or something. For my sins, I will try to watch it, but it took me probably about 3 weeks to watch the episodes because I couldn't take after the first episode. I think by the second episode, halfway through, I was screaming at my mobile phone, so I must have looked like a psychopath because Paul was doing my head in. I don't know how Chioma can tolerate him. But second show I definitely will say is Queen of the South. Porte is my guy. If you lot don't know what Queen of the South is, get to know. And Teresita, as Porte calls the main character, she is really, really turned into a cartel or head of cartel. So if you're into all that stuff, great. And then I stumbled across something with Vanessa Bell Calloway and Clifton Powell. So if you're in the US, and obviously they are kind of royalty for black TV shows, Saints and Sinners, and it's got a 7.5 on IMDb because I used to work in broadcast, so I always check to see whether something's worth watching or not. And if you ever want to check if something has a decent rating or is even worth your time, check imdb.com to see what the rating is, because if it's a 1.1, then you might as well just not even waste your time and go and have that long hot bath. But it's based in the church, but it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So if you've got the time to enjoy and watch, then I would say jump on that. But before we go into our normal weekly Black History, which we tend to do every week or most weeks, so I hope that you've scrolled to look at the TV shows I've just recommended, because without TV, obviously during lockdown, really life is not worth living. Obviously with me in your life it is, but without me, then what do you do? So Black History Month, I'm going to talk about, I might pronounce it wrong, so any Nigerians that are listening, do not come for me, okay, because I am not Nigerian, and if the music goes wrong, I am not a DJ. So let's just make, I've done my disclaimer, right? So Aliko Dangote, so he is one of the richest men in Africa, and he's been for the 10th time in a row, he has been named the richest man in Africa this year, with an estimated net worth of 11.8 billion. And it's not about the money why I'm talking about him, it's about how he began. And when I coach people, it's not always about where they work or what they do, it's also about where they're heading to, because you don't know, someone could start their career and in 10 years they could be president of, I don't know, Deutsche Bank, for example. So it's about the journey, and I think that's the most important thing about success. So his business empire began more than 3 decades ago, the Dangote Group, and it's one of the largest private sector employers in Nigeria, as well as the most valuable conglomerate in West Africa. And I read this some time back, and at age 21, he borrowed 3,000 from his uncle, but I don't know if that's right, because I read that it was his granddad, to import and sell agricultural commodities in Nigeria, in his native country. His ventures quickly became a success, and as a result, he managed to repay the entire loan within 3 months of starting operations. And ultimately, he was able to build his fortune primarily with Dangote cement, although he started his empire by selling commodities such as sugar, salt, and flour. So while he grew up in an upper class environment in Nigeria, he was entrepreneurial from a young age. And in Africa, well, for us Africans, especially, you know, those that I've seen from the country I'm from, Ghana and also Nigeria, 9 times out of 10 people do create their own businesses because the country and the economic instability of the countries, I think that gives people the opportunity to think and be creative of how ways to make money. So his business interests, as I said, built a conglomerate where he now currently owns 85%, which I think in 3 decades for somebody still having that level of control rather than sell everything off like most people because they get a little bit of money waved at them is quite important. So he owns the world's 3rd largest sugar refinery, and together all of his publicly traded companies make up a quarter of market capitalization of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. So, he was born in 1957 in Kano State. He was raised Muslim and lived in an upper class life, as just highlighted. And selling what he sold, it was everyday commodities. So sugar, we all like a cake, but you know, you can use it for bread, you can use it for so many different things. So, you know, moving on, at 21, he graduated from Egypt's Al-Azhar University, considered one of Islam's most prestigious universities. And so moving on, in 1977, after he graduated from college, so during university time, this is where he was able to get his uncle to lend him money to start funds and import soft commodities at wholesale prices from international suppliers. 2 of his main imports were rice from Thailand and sugar from Brazil. He then sold items in small quantities that allowed him to repay his uncle in only 3 months. But one of the key things I think Dangote was very successful at, which I think most of us wish we didn't have to deal with, was cutting out the middleman. So as he built a plant to produce what he had been importing and selling for the previous 20 years, he then just decided to just do it himself, obviously stop relying on Thailand. And I definitely would recommend and suggest, when you are building a business, think about, rather than export or import, grow your own produce. As much as we might think it is laborious, we've got to also consider that when we are working every day for somebody else, it had to start somewhere. Always remember that. So in 2005, he expanded his company by constructing the plant that he now currently runs. And it was financed with 390 million of Dangote's own money. And he used a $479 million loan from the International Finance Corporation, a sister organization of the World Bank. So I do want to make it clear and celebrate his work, because a lot of people want to be successful. What does success look like? I've got no idea in terms of how you define success. But I think when it comes to building your own fortune per se, it's really important to understand, why are you doing it? When we coach, the key question about why somebody wants to become a different version of themselves or a more enhanced version of themselves is the why. What is beautiful about Dangote, he's made a lot of money, but he's also a philanthropist and founded his own private charitable foundation in '94 called the Aliko Dangote Foundation, which is dedicated to adding value to people's lives across Africa by supporting health, education and economic empowerment initiatives. And it is the largest private foundation in sub-Saharan Africa. So I don't know if this is a good thing to talk about, as we've realized there's some dodgy stuff going on, but he did partner with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2013 in order to eradicate polio and strengthen routine immunizations throughout the country. In August 2020, the entire African continent, of which Nigeria was the last, celebrated its official certification as free of wild polio. So today we're talking about getting out of the funk. Procrastination. It's something that I deliberate on personally, because sometimes procrastination isn't because you don't want to do something. Sometimes you're just completely burnt out. So I think making that distinction of what procrastination looks like in your life currently, you will really have to assess, I would say, what you've been doing, how long you've been doing it, and how you're actually physically feeling. And also if you're eating correctly, exercising, because that does contribute to whether or not procrastination is real, I would say. But also, diagnosing procrastination or diagnosing exhaustion are two very different things. So just having that awareness that you're not making the wrong diagnosis of your own behavior. But let's get to the lecture at hand. Procrastination is the act of delaying or putting off tasks until the last minute, or for many people, past their deadlines. I used to work with a kid and I'd ask him to get things done. This guy would give you pressure for about 3 or 4 months, never get anything done. But he had ADHD, and that's a very, very interesting experience working with someone with ADHD, because they're like geniuses, like Haroon Speaks last week, who has adult autism. And how it manifests is these individuals with ADHD, autism, their way of thinking obviously is not in line with how everyone else thinks, but they do get things done, and they do it to a very high standard. So that's the one thing I experienced, is maybe people with ADHD may come across as procrastinators, but 9 times out of 10 they get it done at the last minute, but they do it superbly. So I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but when it comes to procrastination, in terms of how it's been researched, from an academic standpoint, it's a form of self-regulation failure characterized by the irrational delay of tasks, which usually have the potential of negative consequences. Because if you don't get things done, procrastination can not just impact you, but impact the people around you, and then you're not very reliable. So I think procrastination does have its issues surrounding individuals, but also it has a wider scope of consequence when you don't consider other people. And I find that when people are lateness is something I absolutely detest. And anyone that knows me knows that if you're late, I actually tell you're late. It's not something that I do well. And if you're regularly late, I just stop engaging with you, because I just think it's disrespectful. If you know you're going to meet somebody, understand that their time is just as precious as yours. Let's be honest, London town, there is traffic, there is train issues, there is an idiot, trying to, drive like they're driving Miss Daisy, and you're just like, can we just get to the speed limit so I can get on my way? I understand those types of situations that impact why people can be late. But when you're late because you're procrastinating,
it actually impacts your relationships. So these types of things really should be reviewed, and not just by the person procrastinating, but I think if you're someone who procrastinates, try your best to speak to people where that level of procrastination has impacted somebody else. Because one of the things that I constantly come across is people with a lack of self-awareness. When you do something, whether you say something mean to somebody and you don't even care how that person has received or how it's landed, there's no self-awareness. If you're constantly late and you don't even apologize for your lateness, no self-awareness. If you never get things done on time and you don't, again, apologize, zero self-awareness. So there may be other issues at play, but I just think self-awareness is literally the key to your success when you're doing things, because you can regulate how you know, your time frames and when things get done. So whether you're finishing a project or putting it off, avoiding doing homework assignments if you're currently studying at uni, where it doesn't matter your age, because we all have, you know, go back to uni in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, 70s. Age has no issue. But when you procrastinate, that is, to me, a signal that it could be there is a wider issue at hand. So it's a common tendency that most people give in at some point, you know. But one of the key elements that is never really discussed when people discuss procrastination is there is a level of science behind procrastination and why it exists. And we don't always take our time to understand why procrastination happens. Sometimes we judge somebody of being lazy, but there can be, you know, I've recently identified that I have lived a very stressful life, and how it's manifested is I grind my teeth at night, and I've ground I don't even know if to pronounce it, but I've ground my teeth down so badly. The dentist was in shock. I've got a new dentist, so they were like, "Have you not got a mouth guard?" I'm like, "Yeah, I lost it." How do you lose a mouth guard in a bedroom? Only God knows, but that's just my life, isn't it? But I stress about a lot of things, even if it might not appear to many people that I'm stressed, because I like to have fun, I laugh, but I'm always thinking about my next hustle, my next contract, you know, what my life's going to look like in 10 years. There's a lot of other elements going on in my mind. And I don't know if you are experiencing something similar. If you've got children, if you're living in an area that isn't so great, are you worried that your kids may fall into a gang? You know, do you have enough money to send your child to university? Have you got enough money to pay your bills? Did you lose your job during the pandemic? Stress comes in all different forms. Have you put on weight? And as women, as we get to a certain age, that's the bit I feel stressed about. We can never lose the fat. You know, and there is so many blasted diets out there that I just think to myself, honestly, at this point, lipo feels like the only option. I'm not suggesting I'm severely overweight and I don't need a gastric sleeve. But you know, ladies, when you train, you work out, you eat right, you do what you're supposed to do, and it's just not shifting. It's just very stressful because you've got so many outfits due to COVID that you still haven't worn. So, you know, that has added to my problem with my teeth. I've got a lot of outfits. So if anyone's getting married, please don't forget to send me invitations. I don't care if I don't know you. You can catch me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, because I need to wear my outfits. And if there's any guys that want to take me on a date or wants to take me to a wedding, even females, I don't really care. I've got outfits that I need to wear. So please, someone message me. But that level of stress, you know, when you procrastinate, it actually becomes a form of stress relief. And a lot of people don't realize that you just do nothing to just not have to deal with the stress of whatever you've got to do. So this is why procrastination is something we never really talk about. We never think it's as important as it could be as a discussion point in our lives. But what happens is when we procrastinate too often, it becomes a habit. But we've got to remember that stress never leaves our lives. And also, you need to acknowledge what kind of person you are. I'm a stress head. So what I tend to do, and I encourage other people to do it if they actually are really busy in their lives and if they work for themselves like I do, I encourage people to take days off during the week. Go and do something fun. If it means, and this includes staying in bed the whole day watching movies, one of my favorite pastimes, or a TV show or a whole series, like I've told you, or reading, go to the beach. If you don't live in London, get on the train, go to Brighton, Bournemouth, Eastbourne, wherever. Just do something for you and switch your phone off. Because when you're stressed and you don't rest, what happens? Habits are things that you do or behaviors that you endorse on a daily basis without actually thinking it's a habit, because you do it all the time. But we have to remember that we will have triggers that impact our stress factors. So for example, if a bill comes through the door and you know you haven't been paid yet and the payment date is just before you get paid, does that not bring you stress? Because you've now got to pay a fine because you know you're not going to get paid on time. And I'm talking to everyday people. And the reason I talk to everyday people is because we are the ones that are the majority on the planet. So those people that keep thinking of riches and being a millionaire and billionaire, yeah, it's a possibility, but the majority of people are not in those positions. So as a coach, I love working with everyday people because we are all in the same situation. And I think that we need to also acknowledge what that looks like. So in terms of procrastination, you've got to acknowledge the stresses and interrupt the habit by literally understanding that it's just that, a habit. And when you do interrupt the habit, you can do it by doing different things. For example, if you think a certain way and you catch yourself, I always say to people, sit down and write it out. What are you thinking about that's giving you stress? And when you look at if you look at a little book every day and you'll see all the things that you catch yourself thinking about, it actually brings you a lot of pressure where you realize, okay, is what I'm doing or how I'm thinking actually adding value to my life, or is it taking away the minutes that I'm never going to get back? So when we interrupt a habit, it impacts our prefrontal cortex. And we've got to remember the problem isn't working out why have I got a habit. The problem is understanding what the stress feels like. And know when you're feeling a certain type of emotion is when you have to catch yourself. But I think it's the not knowing that you're stressed that causes your paralysis. So procrastination boils down to a battle between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. So what is a limbic system, you're asking yourself, or even you're saying to the computer or phone? The limbic system is a set of brain structures containing the pleasure center, while the prefrontal cortex controls planning and decision making. So let's talk about that. Pleasure center, going back to bed when you should really get up and go to the gym. Pleasure center, eating donuts when you should eat a salad. Pleasure center, going out in the evening when you should really stay in because you've got an early start. Pleasure center, watching a movie and then watch another one after when you know you're super tired, but you're like, just one more film or one more episode, right? That's your pleasure center. So when you're having that battle with your prefrontal cortex of planning and decision making, you're actually diminishing the control of your prefrontal cortex when you're in your limbic system. Because remember, if we think about love and hate, and I'm going to use that as an example, they're two different energies that can't live in the same environment. If you hate so much, it's very hard for you to find a place of love. And when you love so much, it's difficult for you to hate people. You might really dislike someone and someone may really, really get on your nerves. But if you, like, I'm someone, I don't hate anyone. I might not like you. And trust me when I tell you that I'm a human being and there are people I do not like. So I don't even entertain them. if I don't like your behavior, I'm just not going to engage, because I just don't feel that I should be treated in a way that doesn't embody who I am. I'm actually at a stage in my life with my prefrontal cortex where my planning and decision making interrupts habits of engaging with people that don't honor who I am. So in terms of rather being in an environment or having loads of friends that don't actually check or care for you in a way you care for them, cut the friendships and be alone until you meet your own tribe. And plan to do things where you meet people like yourself. If you don't have people that like to draw, go to a drawing class and make friends with someone at a drawing class. If you're someone who likes breakdancing and you can't find a breakdancing group in your area, go and Google it and find a breakdancing group where people can appreciate what you bring to the table. I have a friend, she's a director for the TV show 24 Hours in A&E. We used to work together. It feels like 1,000 years ago, but I just use a really, really good moisturizer. But she talks to me about being around people who celebrate you. And she did say to me that I was very, future facing. I always looked at things that not many people would look at in terms of life, at a young age. And she always didn't understand some of the decisions I made, but she could see that, my way of thinking wasn't always everybody else's way of thinking, which I actually am at a stage in my life that I'm comfortable with who I am, and I know who I am, and I actually love who I am. So when you are in a place of in your limbic system, and you're making pleasurable decisions, or you think they're pleasurable, sometimes they're actually more destructive than you realize. So the prefrontal cortex is less developed and is weaker. So oftentimes the limbic system wins, and that tends to lead to procrastination. But we don't always realize that. If we understood the science behind that, we are operating from the limbic system rather than the prefrontal cortex. You have to remember, when something is too easy to do, it isn't always justified or a justification to do it. When people someone said to me, you hear the phrase, it's too good to be true. Yes and no. Because when you understand your mindset, only experience is your best teacher until you recognize what your operating system or your dominant operating system is. You're not going to make any changes. So when science explains procrastination as the fight between the two parts of the brain, unfortunately, it's faced with the activity or the unpleasant activity, which is usually doing something that is going to enhance your life. But the problem with the limbic system is that it's in the unconscious side of our mind. So we operate from the subconscious, which to me is most of the time the unconscious, and also the conscious mind. And the conscious mind only operates at 10%. So if you think about your prefrontal cortex, you're only operating at 10% when you actually use your brain. I'm not suggesting anyone listening is thick, because I know you're not, but I'm just saying that you do operate mainly from your subconscious or unconscious sense of self. Like if you're going home, you don't have to think too much about how to get home. If you're hungry, you just eat something. A lot of the time people don't think about what they eat. I, unfortunately, because I have some health issues, I have to think about what I eat. And if I eat something unhealthy, I have to really think about the next 3-4 days of how I'm going to make sure that I do not eat anything unhealthy. But I'm very conscious in how I eat, what I do, and even how I talk to people, because it's important for me to use my prefrontal cortex more so than my limbic system. So when you look at the results in your life, you've got to think to yourself, is the limbic system giving me the wins that I'm looking for? Because if I put it off tomorrow never comes. When I used to live in the Middle East, I used to get so irritated, because I'm a now type of person. I used to get so annoyed in Bahrain. They'll be like, no, bukra, that means tomorrow. I'm like, listen, I can't remember what it was I was doing, but I took something somewhere. I don't know if it was, I asked for some paperwork in the, government office. And I warned them. I said, listen, I want it done today. There's no booker business because I got things to do. And you can't let other people's limbic system impact your life. You've got to, and the thing is, be aware of where people operate from. Because just because somebody might be procrastinating, don't allow that person's issue to impact your life. I always say, don't make your problems my problems. So we know that the prefrontal cortex is your internal planner. So, for example, I know on Saturday I've got to aid a friend. Monday I've got a dentist appointment. Tuesday I don't know, I've got something else going on. But every Thursday I'm here on the radio. Well, now COVID and lockdown's lifted. So it's really important to understand I like planning. And if people don't plan, I just don't engage because it's just too much work sometimes just to, do things from the limbic system, because it brings me more stress when I have to try and squeeze everything in a day just to please somebody else. And you get to a stage and age in your life where you stop pleasing other people and you actually start thinking about what works for you. So from a more scientific backup perspective, it's important, if you do procrastinate, to a certain degree, you can't really blame yourself if you don't really understand what that looks like. Okay? Because our limbic system is automated, and don't forget, if we operate 90% from the subconscious or unconscious, it is automated. Yeah? So we need to be aware that our basic survival instincts will always be dominant, because something will happen and you'll know what to do straight away. But you will never have to plan for that. So the limbic system is beneficial because you know what not to do when you feel like you're almost in danger. But it's unfortunate that the planning and decision making part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, is weaker. Because it's not allowing, we're not utilizing it to its fullest potential or fullest capacity. So if we think about, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Limitless. Limitless is brilliant with Bradley Cooper. And he takes a pill and he operates from his prefrontal cortex. So he becomes very successful. But we also need to take into consideration, sometimes when life happens to most of us. We have plans for our future, blah, blah, and things go wrong. I become a procrastinator because I'm frustrated that I haven't gotten to the place I wanted to get to. So that's when I think, what, is it worth it? So that's a question I have to even ask myself. Is it procrastination or is it frustration? And I know it's mainly frustration that turns into procrastination. So we've got to remember that there is nothing automatic about your prefrontal cortex. There's nothing. So you've got to kick it into gear. You've got to take yourself to the gym. I know my health's really important to me. Health is your wealth. If you don't have health, you can't do anything. So I actually make myself go to the gym, and I will spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever I need to do to make sure I feel like I've worked out, or I know I've worked out, and then I can go off into my day. So I think for me, engaging in planning my life is quite important, and it will be really encouraging for everybody to take not stock of what I do, but find a way in small increments to allow you not to procrastinate by actually just doing something scheduled, one thing a day, just one thing a day. That is going to help you move forward. But the other thing I just highlighted about when there may be danger, that's your I can never pronounce this, amygdala, and that is what is your survival part of your brain. So you've got your limbic system, which is your pleasure zone. I call it the donut zone because I love jam donuts, so I have them very seldom, but when I do, thoroughly enjoy it, as well as ice cream. And then you've got your amygdala, which is your survival mechanism. So if someone's trying to chase you, you'll find a place to hide. If there's a fire, you'll move yourself away from the fire. So these things allow your mind to understand and always be aware scan the environment for any type of threats that come to you. And as soon as you detect something, it releases the hormone of adrenaline, which is one of the main ones that change your physiology and allows you to flee or avoid an attack. But when it comes to limbic system, when you're in pleasure, you actually stay there much longer, because the amygdala gets you out of something quickly. The limbic makes you stay somewhere longer, and the planning doesn't have to be too long or too short. So we have 3 different elements that we can work with, but these are some of the suggestions that I think you can understand why you put things off, or these are some things that people tend to put off, which are having, or you endorse having uncertain goals. And when you feel overwhelmed, that is also a form of procrastination. If you're someone who experiences difficulty concentrating, or you hold on to negative beliefs like all men are no good, which I completely disagree. There's some amazing men out there. Some people I know, they're always experiencing personal issues, always. And I'm not very good with, being on the phone with girlfriends for like 3 days about their problems. And when I do experience personal issues, I'll bang on it about it for about 2 or 3 days, or it might be a week. Once I've solved the problem, I've let it go, I've moved on. But that's my process of working through something. And I know people might not understand it, but that's my process. Also, people that actually procrastinate tend to set really unrealistic goals. So if you're someone who sets unrealistic goals, I would really advise you to think about what is important to you and not go a little bit too far into the future that is not actually going to happen. This is something I know I've experienced, being afraid of failure or being afraid of success. That does make you procrastinate. Not always a fun experience, because fear is a form of paralysis. But again, you're never going to achieve anything unless you conquer your fear. So one of the things that I tend to do, something I hate doing, I set a day, I'm like, right, today I have to do that thing. And I do it, and I do it grudgefully. But when I finish, I'm like, wow, that wasn't so bad. So even though I might procrastinate, I always get there in the end. I always make sure I do. And people who make excuses, when you say, oh, can we do, no, I'm a bit too busy, they're procrastinating. Because I can guarantee you, people are not busy. They're at home watching TV shows like me. So procrastination is something that we really need to understand. It is widespread and has impacts that we don't realize can really affect ways that we operate.
Yes. That episode had a lot of useful and interesting insights, so stick around and look out for episode 2. Don't forget to subscribe so I land in your inbox every week, and you can catch me on all my socials on IG at da.millennialcoach, Twitter at @TheMillennialC, and Facebook at The Millennial Coach. So let's keep this conversation going. Feel free to message me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening, and be good. Thanks for tuning in to The Call with me, The Millennial Coach.
Hey everyone, this is Hill Street Soul, and you're tuned in to The Call with The Millennial Coach, discussing topics on real life. Check it out. Everywhere you go, don't forget the ghetto. Listen to The Call. Don't forget the ghetto. With The Millennial Coach. Don't forget the ghetto. 'Cause it's the best show.